Dave, I see you brought some a powerhouse of knowledge with you. You might have been feeling a little inadequate.
I was feeling inadequate today.
So we've got with us from Tri-City Transmission just two of the guys that if your car is going to get worked on there, it passes through the hand. Well, maybe not passes through both their hands, but we've got Keith, who's the main builder, and someone experience that you wouldn't believe, been an industry trainer, a trainer back east, trained at Arizona Automotive Institute, and is now your main builder. And then Ken, 30 years of experience, does all the diagnostics. So if your car's in Tri-City with a problem, Ken's going to touch it.
Now, you guys have been around this transmission business a long time. Ken, 30 years?
30 years.
30 years. Keith, 17 years. What have been the biggest changes and the challenges that you guys see coming down the road?
Well, I think the biggest change is going to be electronics, obviously. 10, 15 years ago, we hardly ever saw a computer, and now every single car has at least 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, we were scanning a Jaguar just the other day. There was 17 modules, and there was codes in every single one of them. So you can't just... In the old days, it was vacuum modulators and governor gears, and that was all you had to worry about.
Well, Keith and I were talking before the show, too, and there's the technology whole aspect, which is good and bad. It makes it easier, and then it gets harder. It makes it easier and harder, but when it gets down to the mechanics of it, that's what you're doing, Keith. We're talking about you not only have to fix the transmission, but you got to find out why the transmission went bad or what the problem was in the first place so you don't have it happen again. And what do you call that? What's your
I call that root cause analysis. If I don't get to the bottom line of what caused that transmission to fail, then definitely I've got a problem. So I have to find exactly what's going on to cause that transmission to fail to fix it.
And that could be two things. It could be the going on and finding another repair, something that's controlling the transmission, or it could be a little bit of education of the customer. This is what happened. Here's how we can prevent that now, right?
Definitely. It can be anything from sensors from the outside, on the outside of the transmission that affect the operation of the transmission, or some circuits inside the transmission that wear just from time and oscillation, and they bell bodies and things like that wearing out.
Right. And then we were talking bad batteries can cause a transmission to fail. We were talking about the CD40, which would be very common in a Mazda Tribute or a Ford Escape. In a weak battery there with a bad alternator, in low voltage, the car, you may not think it has a bad battery because it starts every time, but yet it's running low voltage, and that is why the transmission fails. So that's one of the challenges in our business. We've got so much into remanufacturing of transmissions where we take your transmission out of the car, we put it in a box, and we ship it to some factory. They ship us another one. Well, we never took that transmission apart to see why it failed and the root cause analysis to find out, hey, we got something wrong with the vehicle.
A little morbid term would be the autopsy.
The autopsy of the transmission.
Yeah.
So that's a huge change in the diagnostics of it. And Ken diagnoses every car that comes through Tri-City Transmission. He's anywhere from 40 to 50 cars a week that come through, and everything comes through him because he's kind of my gatekeeper. Because the stakes are high when you do transmission repair. You can replace a transmission that didn't need to be replaced. And in the old days, you got a turbo 350 transmission for $350, but some of these transmissions are $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and you just don't want to pitch a transmission at it. You may fix it because you replaced everything, but it only needed one piece.
Well, and not only that, but the labor. Everything is so tucked in there. It's tight fits. I don't know how you got out of doing the R&R. That's probably nice to not have to do anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, everything is just buried. But then what you were saying, Dave, about the battery problem a little bit ago, there's so many things unrelated to the transmission that could make you believe you have a transmission problem, and you really don't.
Prime example of that is a mass airflow sensor on a GM. They're notorious for making the transmission go bad. So when we get into the transmission, we don't really see a hydraulic leak. We think we got low line pressure. Well, that line pressure is controlled by the mass airflow sensor. So we go look at the mass airflow sensor, and this guy's got this fancy K&N filter, and all this oil has coated the sensor, and now the transmission's bad. So there's more of a holistic approach to it versus you just need another transmission. The vehicle determines how long that transmission works in some cases.
Well, and in my shop, we see battery failures that cause all kinds of weird problems, and it can be tied to a battery. Mass airflow sensor, you can have oxygen sensor heater problems. So many things go in. These transmissions, as technologically advanced as they are, in many cases, they're just being told what to do.
Yeah,
If
no.
you give them the wrong instructions, they're not going to work right.
We just dealt with a 2005 Highlander, and the guy's complaint was when I drive this thing to Payson, every now and then it shifts and it does this and the steering wheel shakes and I don't know. And we drove it and the thing drove fantastic. And I called the guy. I said, man, I think the only way we're going to be able to duplicate your problem is to drive to Payson. So we put hydraulic gauges on it. We put the scanner on it. And we actually went to that hill just past the Saguaro Lake turnoff. And we went up and down and up and down and up and down until we made it happen. And what that ended up being was just a recalibration of the computer.
So is that a reflash? You just had to reprogram, or what do you mean recalibrate?
Recalibration, it's just like your computer at home says, hey, there's updates for your computer. Okay. Well, same thing. Your car would do updates, but it's not plugged into the internet. So if this problem develops in this particular instance, the adaptive values, because the computer is learning your driving habits, the adaptive values have got compromised. So we go in, wipe them out, and then put in a new program. So that's what it was.
It's amazing. I mean, it's just the little and here he is thinking he needs a transmission. You know, that's one of those things you hear horror stories sometimes. You see a brand new transmission in the car, and then you come in and it's in another shop or whatever, and now all of a sudden a little reprogramming, a couple $100 repair or
a tweak here, a tweak there. We fix many more with scanners and this widget and that widget, but it's no longer pull it out and put another one in. Let's go with Dell in Phoenix on a 2006 Buick Lucerne. Go ahead, Dell. You are on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
I need my transmission fluid changed, and I'm wondering what is the best way. I don't seem to like the flushing. How's the best way to get the old transmission fluid out to put the new in? Well, and what the price differences are.
Well, how many miles are on this car, Dale?
70-some thousand.
Perfect.
Have you ever serviced it before, Dell?
No.
No. Okay. Why don't you give it a try, Matt? What would you say?
Well, now you're going to put me on the spot. We got the transmission superstars in here, and you're asking me.
Keith can taste the fluid and know which clutch is going bad in the transmission. I mean, it's that good.
Well, there's probably absolutely nothing wrong with that transmission. First time around, never been serviced. I would believe at the transmission shop that you're going to want to pull down the pan, remove the pan. You're going to take the filter out, open up the filter, make sure everything's okay. New pan, gasket, new filter, put it back together, refill it with fluid, and probably be good.
70,000 miles without a service. So I think you're getting better.
But it also depends on the condition of the fluid.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Dell, and I think just everybody, there is so much information out there, good information, bad information. I had a guy in the other day, he was told by the shop that his transmission was sealed and not to service it. Well, that shop didn't want to do a transmission service. Some guys run from transmission services.
Maybe they didn't know how.
They didn't know how, right? So really, 4T65 transmission is the transmission that's in there. It's been around a long time. So what we're going to want to do is a traditional transmission service, remove the pan, and dissect the filter to see what kind of health is going on with that transmission. New filter, pan gasket. If the fluid looks really like it's been real oxidized or varnished, I'm going to recommend a complete fluid exchange. And that's where we go ahead and run the transmission pump. Let it pump some fluid out while we add clean fluid in. You may run 15 quarts of fluid through it in order to get that transmission fluid pristine and cherry red.
So what there is, you can do a pan off, that's a traditional service, or you can do the flush, or you can do a combination of both. The pan off, you're going to change 5 of 13 quarts. In my analysis of that is, you talk about chocolate milk or a cocktail. You take a drink, put some more 7-Up back in it, now you've just got a diluted drink. Mm-hmm. Chocolate milk, you dump it out, and there's all this heavy sediment on the bottom. Fill it with milk again, you still have a glass of chocolate milk. So if you've got dirty fluid, changing just a little bit of it doesn't always help.
Yeah.
So I would suggest in the future, though, bring that transmission service down to what?
Every 30,000
30,000, and then do the traditional pan-off service, or alternate every other one. Flush. Keith's looking at me funny.
And we were asking these guys before the show as far as what changed. One thing that's changed is really the price of the transmission and how complicated these things are. Keith, when I hired him, I said, how many transmissions can you build in a week? He said, Dave, the answer used to be 10. But that's like 6, 7, or 8 because they're so much more complicated than they used to be. You really don't want to neglect them. They've gotten more expensive. Over service is cheap insurance, so every couple years.
Dell had a second part to this question, is how much? And I don't like to get into how much. It's going to vary. Do you want good fluid? Do you want cheap fluid? Do you want universal fluid, one size fits all? Sometimes that's okay. But call around. You're in Phoenix. Go to the Bumper to Bumper website, bumpertobumperradio.com. You're going to find Tri-City Transmission there, but you're going to find a host of other shops where transmission service is normal everyday maintenance. Not a problem for any one of those shops.
Not a quickie lube type shop. So thanks for the call, Dell. Let's go with Bert in Phoenix on a 2007 Crown Victoria. Go ahead, Bert. You are on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yeah, I have a problem with the Crown Victoria that when I start it up, it runs fine for a while, but then it cuts out. I have no problem restarting it, but it'll cut out inadvertently. I'll be in gear or in traffic or in neutral, and it just stops. Starting it back up, like I said, is no problem. But like yesterday, I went maybe a quarter of a mile, and it stopped maybe 4 or 5 times. Another thing, when I took it out last night, I had the headlights on, and I could see the dash lights flickering. Now,
that's a good tidbit of information.
Okay. Can you tell me what's wrong with it?
Do you have any check engine light, or when the car is running and driving, are there any other warning indicators lit up on the dash?
No, nothing.
Okay. Well, what I would be starting with on this car would be a charging system analysis. Although it doesn't, it says it starts every time, so I'm not looking at a battery, but we could have a bad ground. You've got to make sure you start with a good battery, make sure the alternator is working well. And, if the ground wire from the computer shares with something else, maybe the air conditioner, if there's something in common and it's robbing the ground, it could just cause the car to shut down and start up. And without a check engine light or anything, a little bit more difficult to find. Typically, there's not some flag waving at you saying, look over here. But, again, it's just something that's going to need to get into a shop, have a little bit of diagnostics done. Maybe there's a code getting set that is not causing the check engine light to come on. But if you can duplicate it and provide that type of information to the service advisor, those symptoms, what else is happening, that's going to help them find your problem quicker and end up saving you some money.
Well, thanks for the call, Bert. Let's go with Robert in Queen Creek on a 2006 Dodge Ram. Go ahead, Robert. You were on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yeah, I think the previous callers answered my question, but just real quick, I got about 95, 96 on my truck. I have done a reflush, about 60, and then the following year I had a filter changed. Should I be considering another filter? I'm going to keep this truck as long as I can. Another filter change and another flush in the future, or will that pretty much take care of it?
Hey Robert, what engine is in your Dodge?
It's a 4.7.
Okay. That's going to be a 545 RFE transmission.
You like to get technical, but what are you towing with it, though? That's another important question.
I'm sorry?
Are you using the vehicle to tow?
No. Once in a while when we go fishing, I tow a boat. That's about it.
Okay.
Nothing heavy.
It's all yours, Dave.
I don't know. What do you think, Keith?
Well, to tell you the truth, you can never really over-service your fluid. It's just like your engine. The transmission likes to have a fresh drink of oil. It'll help it last longer. Get rid of the particulates, whatever is floating around inside. And there are detergents inside your transmission fluid that help it to stay lubricated and work properly. So definitely you want to service it frequently, especially with Arizona heat, because that fluid will break down.
Okay.
Well, that's for sure. That's reminiscent of a car that we looked at on Friday, Ken. It was roughly an 06 Dodge, 300,000 miles, original engine, original transmission.
But get with your shop. They're going to give you the best advice on pan off or flush or every other or occasionally a combination of both.
Dell had asked a question about the price of a transmission fluid exchange. And on that particular car, by the way, my guy scolded me at the break. They said it's not a 4T65, Dave. It's a 4T80. So they're keeping me on point. But $289. 2006 is Dextron 6, which is synthetic fluid from GM, but that is the price of the service. And the reason I bring that up is once in a while I get a call from a guy, and I'll say it's $289 for a complete fluid exchange and filter pan off. You say, I can get it done across the street at the car wash for $89. And Well, I said, well, do they road test it? Do they scan it? Do they do this? Do they do that?
Reset the learned values. There's a lot more than just getting the fluid out.
And all they do is they stick a straw down the dipstick tube, if there happens to be one. They suck it out, and then they put some back in. And that is not what I would call sufficient. I did work at the car wash when I was in high school, and I did work on transmissions, but I don't feel like I was qualified to do so. So a transmission is an expensive investment. So you don't want to just trust it to just anybody.
Well, and I had one of those too. The price I think was $273 or something. The guy says, "Well, I can go to and it's $120." And I said, "Let's stop and think about this. Let's just go find the cheapest place to buy that fluid. Your big brand auto parts store. Fluid's $8 a quart. And they sell it. They give it away because they know you're going to buy hand cleaner and rags and da 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 da.
It's a lost leader for them.
So $8 times the amount of fluid that the car holds is $40 more than $120. It doesn't. If it defies logic or math, beware. There's no $89 services. Maybe on your 77.
Right. Well, the long and short of Dell's answers, I would think anywhere between $200 to $300 for a transmission service could be reasonable. Let's go with John in Chandler on a 2000 Acura. Go ahead, John. You were on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yeah, I've got a 2000 Acura TL I bought back in May. It had about 135,000 miles on it. It's got about 140 now. So I know I don't have any service history on the car. The guy I bought it from didn't give me any service history. And I'm just trying to find out whether I should do what Honda recommends, which is a drain and refill on the transmission, or actually have a fluid exchange done and have it completely flushed, having no history, no knowledge of the service history.
I'll take this one, Dave.
Okay.
Even though well, you're right. There's no changeable. I mean, the only way to change the filter on the Hondas and the Acuras is to open up the case, which of course we're not going to do.
It's not serviceable.
It's non-serviceable.
Right.
So what you're going to want to do, you can do a couple ways. If it's really, really dirty, probably do a flush and really use all that fluid to push all the dirty out and let some clean run out till you have 100% clean fluid. Or if it's not too bad, just do a drain and fill. And always use a new crush washer, aluminum crush gasket. That's how we would do it. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to let Ken chime in. But, how is the fluid now? And based on the fluid now, what does it look like? So when you look at the fluid, is it real varnished? You use the word dirty. Transmission fluid doesn't get dirty. It varnishes or, deteriorates with time.
You're not going to be here next week, so watch yourself.
So, so how does the fluid look now? And you can do a drain and refill, and you could do a drain and refill twice to get what you're looking for. But absolutely on the transmission, don't sacrifice servicing it just because you're not sure what happened. You want to see if you can get a couple 100,000 miles out of it. What do you think, Ken?
No, I agree. I mean, it is. If you know what the fluid should look like, then you know what you're looking for. So, if it's not too bad, you could probably go ahead and drain it a few times, and you'd probably be okay. But with 135, 140,000 miles, it's definitely good to at least get most of that fluid out.
And that's good news, 135 or 40. A lot of those Honda Accura transmissions are a little finicky. So
right around the 2,000 mark, they are a little finicky.
All right, so we're going to get Todd, Diane, Steve, and Mozetta are all holding, but we're going to go with Todd on the BMW. Todd, you're on Bumper to Bumper Radio. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Great. How about you?
Listen, I'm a paint and body man in a shop, and I don't trust the mechanics that I work with in the shop, and I'm not going to mention the shop, and I wanted your guys' advice on this on my BMW X5. I have a 01 X5. I bought it as a salvage. It's a split shop where it's a German repair shop on one side and it's a paint and body shop on the other. I bought it from the mechanical shop. The car took a hit on the left front. Pushed the motor over, broke all the motor perches off the actual aluminum engine block. It was salvaged out for that. I pulled the motor, I fixed it, I put all the tigged the perches back on, put time certs back in it. And when I had the motor out, I took the converter out of the trans, dumped a couple quarts of fluid out of, whatever the converter holds, usually about 2 quarts. Put the motor back in, I've been fine. I've driven it for 20,000 miles now. I want to do a transmission service on it. It's got 112,000 miles on it. And I watch the guys in the mechanical shop all day long not use specific manufacturer transmission fluid. They're always sticking in like Global or, whatever they can, as most shops do, to stick the cheapest fluid back in. And, they tell the customers that they're putting the correct factory fluid back in. It's terrible, but that's the way it goes. Underneath the sticker on my transmission pan on the BMW X5, it says lifetime fluid, don't touch it, don't change it, don't ever go near it. When I had the converter out, I stuck 2 quarts of Global back in it because that's all I could get at the time when I was doing this on the weekends at the shop.
Well, we had a feeling this is where that question was going to go with the fluid level. And if you'll go to bumpertobumperradio.com, send Dave and I an email, I will actually send you the service bulletin from ZF. ZF is the manufacturer of that transmission. But you gave a whole lot of, that's a whole show topic, is the fluids. But that transmission does say lifetime never service it, or might even say it's 100,000 miles. It's a little orange sticker on the bottom. But what the bulletin from ZF is, it says, hey, that was a translation problem with German to English. That transmission should be serviced every 62,000 miles, and you must use the right fluid. That, I think, takes ZF Lifeguard 6. It's expensive. It's like $40 a quart or a liter.
I want to say
It comes
X5.
in
It
a
almost
liter.
sounds like a 5L40, which is a GM transmission. You, Keith, you're looking at me cross-eyed. Am I wrong?
Well, I'm not exactly sure of the transmission type, so I won't scold you on that one.
Some of them have ZF 5 HPs and some are 5L40s. But definitely use factory fill. Anyone listening, that is the way to go. There's no fits-all oil that just works. And a lot of the oil manufacturers will come into us and say, yeah, this works for that, this works for that.
Mike from Tri-City Transmission, the former owner, he used to say, if I like mayonnaise and he likes mustard and you like relish, what are you going to put on there that we all like on that hamburger? There isn't one.
Right.
Gotta stick. If it calls for mayonnaise, put the mayo.
It's time for Fact or Fiction.
I'm always very happy when I can get that right. Well, the fact or fiction for today, and this one comes from a phone call I get on a regular basis, but, and everyone pay attention. My transmission feels like it's acting funny. A transmission service is a good idea. I should just start with that to see if it cures it. We're going to go right down the line here. Ken, what are you thinking?
Is that a trick question?
Fact or fiction?
One word. One word answer.
Oh, it's a one-word answer.
Tick tock, tick tock.
I would say no.
Fiction.
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 Fiction? Matt, what are you saying?
Fiction.
Fiction. Well, that's the first thing that everybody does. My transmission is acting up. They're hoping for the best. They're crossing their fingers thinking, I can just service it and just really hope that the problem is going to go away.
And you might get lucky one time. Maybe you've got a pan gasket that's leaking,
And the
so you've lost
low.
fluid. So then you service it with a pan and get the fluid right, and that might take care of your symptom, but it's not going to fix anything.
There's a few situations where it does. A torque converter chatter on a Ford in a couple of years. That was one that fixed it. Some of the old transmissions of the old days that made a lot of garbage and would plug up the filter. Changing the filter was a good idea. But Ken checks out 50 cars a week and he diagnoses it, and what it does is it takes away the evidence we are looking for to know what to do with that transmission.
Cleaned up the crime scene.
The first thing we want to do is get a blood test on the transmission, see what kind of shape it's in, smell it, know what it's like in order to make you a good recommendation. But very rarely does a transmission service fix a transmission. So it's almost just a waste of money. So you may spend $200 or $300, get it serviced, and then still have the same issue. So we're talking about electronics. We're fixing a transmission with this scanner, and putting in recalibration. So if we just threw fluid in it, it may just be a total waste of money.
Yeah,
So.
have you ever got this one? You come in, there was nothing wrong with my transmission until you serviced it. And then you go look in the glove box, they were just at another shop getting it diagnosed, and like, hey, it's not jiving here.
Right. And as a matter of fact, you can take a small problem and make it worse by servicing it. So the best thing you can do, and there's fewer and fewer guys that actually diagnose transmissions, but the best thing you can do is get an accurate diagnosis and go from there. Let's go with Mozetta in Chandler on a 1997 Cadillac STS. Go ahead, Mozetta. You are on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi. I have a 97 Cadillac that was given to me by my uncle, and I want to keep it. Now, I fixed just about everything under the hood except for the transmission, and my body and my mechanic said that he wouldn't touch it. I heard an answer before. You said that's because they don't want to fix it, or what? Should I bring it to your shop so you can look at it?
What year is that Cadillac? I mean, how many miles are on the Cadillac?
I think it's over 100,000.
Okay.
Well, and that's one of those common myths, Dave, that, I hear it with some of the fleet services companies that take care of transmissions, and we say the fluids needs to be serviced. It's oxidized or whatever your term is. I say dirty.
Dirty.
And they oh no, that's never been serviced before. We're not touching it. I think that's a myth of the 70s and 80s and with certain transmissions.
Yeah, it really has changed, and here's where the myth comes from. In the old days, you'd have a transmission that had an issue, and people would go in from our factor fiction, and they would try a service to try and fix it. And because they were hoping that was going to do it. Well, when they serviced it, it kicked the transmission over the edge. It went from having a problem to just going bad. So it just sped up the process. So here's my recommendation on transmission service, high mileage, not really sure. If the transmission doesn't have a problem, by all means, service it.
No symptom.
No symptom. Yeah, it should be scanned. It should be road tested. If there's no problem with the transmission, you'd be crazy not to. Now, if there's a problem with the transmission, you say, well, am I looking at buying a transmission? There is times when you might not. But for the most part, you're going to be worse off with bad fluid than you are servicing your transmission. So it's the lesser of two evils.
So the answer to the question is yes, bring it in, have a look at it. Complimentary inspection at Tri-City.
Right.
And
you can come by in the parking lot. I'll pull the dipstick out, and I smell it. I'm a connoisseur of transmission fluid. Go ahead, Keith.
The best thing really to do is to go ahead and have a professional look at your fluid, because we're going to look at it, and we can determine whether you are at that level where you can get it serviced or no, you've got other problems happening, and we'll advise you accordingly from there.
Yeah, but just for the mechanic say, no, don't do it. I don't think he's really looking at the situation.
And so many of those little minor problems can be fixed in the car, Keith. That's another thing we were talking about before the show is the amount of these repairs where the transmission does not need to come out. You can take the pan off. You have access.
For sure. Well, thanks so much for the call, Mosetta. Let's go with Steve on a 2007 Tundra. Go ahead, Steve. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Good. Hey, listen, I took my Tundra down to the Toyota dealer a couple months ago at 100,000 miles and asked them about changing the transmission fluid. And they actually advised me that transmission has world service transmission fluid in it that never needs to be changed.
Yeah.
And I'm just calling to confirm that. I presume the dealer tells me that, so I feel like I've got to trust that information. I've never heard of world service transmission fluid.
Bad information. I think that is a disconnect, or not even a disconnect. That's the marketing department running selling you a truck, and the service department buying into it.
Well, there's two schools of thought. I mean, they're in the business of selling cars. They're also in the business of selling parts.
Yeah, I mean, when do you change the transmission fluid? When the life of the transmission's over? Put new fluid in with the new transmission?
That's a great question, and it's something that I don't think, the transmission fluids are getting better. Toyota WS is an excellent fluid. But I pull the dipstick on a car that's got 50,000 miles on it. I look at that fluid, and it is in horrible shape. So don't tell me that stuff just lasts forever. It wears out just like anything else. So I'm going to disagree, and the owner's manual disagrees with me. But there's marketing motive behind that owner's manual.
Well, Steve, I'll tell you, I have a 2010 Tundra. And in our shop, we say we're not going to do to your car what we wouldn't do to our car or a mom's car or a family member. And my fluid at 30,000 miles was dirty. I'm a little bit of an aggressive driver. And I said dirty again. Dave doesn't like that. So I just and it does have the World Service fluid or the Toyota World fluid. Just drained out what came out of the pan or pulled the plug. There's no pan on that one.
Right.
I actually didn't do the service. And then just topped it off. I think it took 5 quarts. That's perfectly good service. It's going to add life to that transmission without a doubt.
Great question, Steve. We're going to sneak in Robert real quick in Mesa on a 2000 F250. Go ahead, Robert. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, yeah. I've got a 2000 F250 with about 150,000 miles. I ended up putting electric fans on it because, I drive it around town quite a bit. And, with the low RPM and trying to keep it cool in the summertime, I heard electric fans would help. Well, I did that. and but my biggest problem, it helps some, but my biggest problem is at idle. I was stuck on the freeway, sitting there at idle, and the the AC would just turn off, and if I rev my engine to about 1,500 to 2,000 RPM, it would start cooling again. And I was just wondering what I can do to get that problem to go away.
Well, I doubt that this is an airflow issue. I mean, the symptom really sounds like it, but the fact that you've got those extra fans in there and you're moving a lot of air under the radiator or across the radiator and the condenser, just make sure there's no obstructions. Make sure you didn't get a piece of paper or something sucked up in between the radiator and condenser. But for air conditioning, you have got to start with a basic service in making sure that you've got the right amount of fluid or refrigerant in the car. You can't just, quote, put a can in or add a little bit till it gets a little colder. These things are down to the ounce of how much refrigerant they need. So you want to start by evacuating or recovering all of the refrigerant, measuring it, and then putting back in the right amount. So let's just say it holds, for the sake of easy math, it holds 2 pounds, or if it holds 3 pounds, we take 2 out, and it requires 3. You pay for the pound. We put a little bit of oil in there with some dye to help find any leaks. Or maybe there's nothing, but we got to start and ensure that you've got the right amount of refrigerant.
In AC services, just talking to people, you have to realize that it's a two-step process. So you're going to go in, they're going to charge the system, evacuate and recharge it, and then we're going to check for leaks. So you may actually, if you go in there, it blows cold, and you're happy, great, but it may need to go back. So glad you guys could share your Saturday with us. Thanks, Ken and Keith, for coming in to start a relationship with a great shop, bumpertobumperradio.com.